Climate change is all the rage. It's the new cool thing. T-shirts with climate change, songs about climate change. It's everywhere. But how nuanced is this conversation? Do we understand real climate action? Take governments, for example. They have a new pet project. It's called net zero emissions. What does that mean? What you produce must be equal to what you remove. We're talking about greenhouse gases here. If you produce 10 tons of carbon dioxide, you must also remove 10 tons of carbon dioxide. It's called net zero emissions. How can you achieve this? Well, there are many ways. You can grow more forests. You can cut down emissions. You can use green technology. All of these strategies lead to net zero. The Western world loves it. It gives the impression that they're actually doing something about it. The US, Britain, Australia, the European Union, they've all set the same deadline, net zero by 2050. That's what they say. They want other countries to do the same. Reach net zero by around 2050 or 2060. But India is not playing ball. Here's what the Environment Secretary had to say. And I'm quoting this. It is how much carbon you're going to put in the atmosphere before reaching net zero that is more important. That's India's Environment Secretary, and he's right. Net zero targets are becoming an excuse. As one scientist put it, burn now, pay later. This is what the West is doing. They're still emitting greenhouse gases. They're still cutting down forests. And if you question them, they talk about their net zero targets. But the fact is, climate change is already here. It's not going to wait another 30 years. Plus, carbon removal does not happen in real time. Let me show you what the folks at Greenpeace say. And I'm quoting again, net zero pledges are being released now on a nearly daily basis. They assume that emissions from burning coal can be compensated in real time by protecting a forest or planting trees, ignoring the fact that plants need time to grow whilst cutting fossil fuel emissions has immediate results. Do you see the problem now? The West does not have a long-term solution. They're banking on money and technology, not to cut emissions, but to remove the greenhouse gases they produce. Well, it's a good plan, but it's far from perfect. Our goal must be to cut all emissions, not to plant a tree for every piece of coal we burn. It won't work that way. That's a license to keep using fossil fuel. So what is India proposing here? More focus on the process. India wants to reduce the emissions intensity of its economy. By 2016, a 24% dip was reported. The final target is 35% by 2030. And to make this happen, you need climate financing. We're talking about a lot of money. India needs to spend $2.5 trillion to meet these targets, $2.5 trillion. Where will all of this money come from? The Western nations can afford to splurge on climate change. Countries like India cannot, not at the moment. Their primary commitment is towards the people. So what's the middle ground? Well, we already have one. It was agreed upon at the Rio summit in 1992. Common but differentiated responsibility. You see, emissions do not disappear. Carbon dioxide can stay in the atmosphere for centuries, which means the pollution you see today is probably a few centuries old. This is called historical emissions. And here's how each country stacks up on historical emissions. The US has 28.8%, China 9%, Russia 8%, Germany 7%, Britain 5.8%, India 2.4%. North America and Europe began their industrial revolution in 1760. That's the 18th century. What about India? The 20th century. The Western world had a head start of 140 years. That's 140 more years of pollution. But the finish line is apparently the same for everyone, 2050 or 2060. How is this even fair? Western countries became rich by polluting the world. Now they're preventing other nations, nations like India, from doing the same, preaching them. I understand that climate change is a global problem. Everyone has to work towards it. But we must identify the perpetrators and the victims. At COP26, the West must loosen the purse strings. Climate action must be funded by the climate criminals. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.